Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. MATTROISE here with another live stream tonight of the season finale of Dark Side of the Ring, the Steroid Trials. I hope you guys are ready. We're going to watch it together live here. I'm going to have the audio playing. We're going to have a great time here tonight. And I hope to see each and every one of you on the stream. How's everybody doing tonight? Good evening. Are you guys ready to hear about the steroid scandal in 1994? I know I am. The question is, are you guys ready? That is the major question of the night. So how's everybody doing tonight? We are live. Who do we have in the house tonight? Who do we have? Asil Hatchet, Codell Morris, Vince McSnowman. What's going on, man? How's everybody doing tonight? Michael Harper, NASCAR Aaron, Mickey MC. What's going on? The show's about to begin. Let's begin. The steroid trial.
Cut. Through the 80s and into the 90s, on the back of Hulk Hogan's larger-than-life physique, the World Wrestling Federation was a merchandising machine, generating hundreds of millions in revenue. But then, news broke that the mastermind behind the WWF's unrivaled prosperity was accused of pushing steroids on his wrestlers.
Vince McMahon and the World Wrestling Federation have been indicted on charges of providing steroids to WWF entertainers.
Everybody was on steroids. That's what they were marketing. We did whatever it took to get what the people wanted to see.
The guys
to be in a better position and make more money.
And Vince McMahon was aware of it. Everybody was.
The boys need their candy. Did he ever say, well, I got to put an end to this? No.
A lot changed. Prior to that time, using or possessing anabolic steroids was as legal as taking an aspirin.
Authorities sought a high-profile case to make clear they would prosecute steroid users and pushers.
They were a flashing red light to prosecutors wanting to make an example out of things. They could have taken the whole company down.
If convicted, McMahon faces 8 years in prison and $500,000 in fines.
With two trials looming, those involved found themselves tangled in a world of surveillance and paranoia.
You don't know when you get out of your car, there's someone to come, and then who knows what.
WWF head Vince McMahon faced down a parade of superstar witnesses who held his fate in their hands.
If it was an overt agreement, I can get you steroids. That's Vince McMahon being a drug dealer to his top star.
I wanted to expose it for all it was worth.
The federal government came to take down the pro wrestling business. Little did they know, they had to deal with Jerry McDivitt and Vince McMahon, who promptly kicked their ass. You have no idea what I'm going to do to you. I mean, I'm going to crush you like a bug.
So they had a very big lawyer on their hands. What's up, Moxley, Elf, Falto, Tylon Hopkins? What's up, everybody? All right, this is the lawyer.
That's my officer. This was the headline today. He was indicted up in New York. You can see Vince there. That's me doing the cross-examination of the jury. I'm Jerry McDivitt. I'm a lawyer, and I've represented the WWE for approximately 30 years.
Jerry McDivitt, you are the attorney for the WWE, a very, very famous face lately, I must say.
Ranging from Chris Benoit's situation. We're not going to speculate on it here on television, the soundbite atmosphere of television, to the unfortunate case of Owen's death.
He died last night in a tragic accident.
Wow.
Those 30 years of what you go through in all of those episodes together to try to get to the other side, keep going, that's what forms those kind of bonds. And that's a picture of Vince at my wedding. Jerry is one of the most intelligent men I've ever met. His intellect is scary. If I found myself into a heinous situations by hook or crook, I needed the best lawyer that money can buy. I would reach out to Jerry McDivitt to save my ass.
He's an intimidating figure. He's tall, he's brash and fearless in the way that I saw him in trial, and a valuable figure to Vince McMahon over the years. My name's Wade Keller. I'm the editor of the Pro Wrestling Torch newsletter, and I was on site for the entire Vince McMahon steroid trial. Vincent K. McMahon is obviously the most well-known promoter for the past 35 years.
It's my distinct privilege to present to you
Hogan.
As far as like Vince McMahon's success and everything like that, you take Hulk Hogan out of the picture, Vince McMahon would not be anywhere near as successful. My name is Dave Meltzer, and I'm the editor of the Wrestling Observer newsletter, and I've been writing about wrestling for a lot of years, 49 years, 50 years. Hogan, you know, he was one of the biggest stars in the history of wrestling, and wrestling exploded on his back in the late 80s. He was the all-American hero. You gotta say your prayers and you gotta eat your vitamins. At that time, what the fans were responding to were cool-looking guys with these great physiques.
They were just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it was becoming more of a vehicle to sell merchandise than anything else. My name is John Arezzi. I'm a wrestling historian, going back 30 years to my original radio show called Pro Wrestling Spotlight. Pro wrestling became more cartoonish with these big monsters that were being given names like the Ultimate Warrior, the Warlord.
He's the biggest two-man. Oh, man, look at the size of these guys. We could have had a football team and nothing even touch us. My name's Terry Shapinski. I wrestled in the WWF as the Warlord. I was also one half of the Tag Team Powers of Pain.
There are estimates that 90% of the wrestlers in that time period were all on steroids.
Wow.
In the late 1980s, steroid use was legal if the drugs were prescribed by a personal physician for the treatment of an injury or disease. And WWF wrestlers had unlimited access thanks to a willing accomplice. Do you know who Dr. George Zahorian is?
Oh, yeah.
Dr. George Zahorian was the ringside physician for the Pennsylvania State Athletic Commission. And he was assigned to ringside at all of the wrestling matches in Allentown, Pennsylvania for their TV tapings.
And the doctor is right there at his side.
George Zahorian was a fan of the wrestlers, and they put him on the show.
Very good wrestlers coming out here. Really getting a few.
As the state's representative, Dr. Zahorian is responsible for examining each wrestler to ensure they are healthy enough to perform.
As he was doing the blood pressure and everything else, after he was done, he always had this big doctor bag. And he would open it up afterwards, and it'd be filled with steroids. And he would say, is there anything you would like? And if it isn't there, I can get it for you, and I can send it to you.
Wow.
He set up shop every taping, and the guys lined up to purchase their candy.
Valium, Tylenol 3, Percocet, Percodan, Somas, pain pills, steroids. My name is Brian Blair. I'm known as B. Brian Blair, half of the Killer Bees. And we said, Hulkster, you know, we need a little pump on. He said, yeah, man, you could use a little bit more muscle in those wings there. And he said, people do not understand the pressure that you're under. Look the best you can to keep your spot in the business. It was high pressure.
For over a decade, steroids were an open secret in wrestling. In the late 80s, despite athletes being exposed as cheaters,
stripped of his gold medal for testing positive to using anabolic steroids,
steroid abuse was becoming a political lightning rod.
There was a lot of hysteria about steroids back in that era. It always sort of portrayed it that the athletes who were using it were somehow misusing a drug that was made for some other purpose. Steroids is, as far as I can tell, the only drug that was ever made in this country's history for which the drug manufacturers were not required to give dosage, duration, and adverse effects for the purpose it was made, which was athletic enhancement. There's a lot of good, truthful reasons to tell people what damages can be done by taking these drugs that you don't need to lie to them about. Just tell them the truth. But the government never did that. The federal Congress was reacting to some of this hysteria by the Anabolic Control Act in 1990, which made it the first time a controlled substance.
This means that trafficking in steroids will be treated in much the same manner as trafficking in cocaine or methamphetamines.
With a new law in place to curtail steroid dealing, particularly to teen athletes, The FBI targets weightlifting coach Bill Dunn, who quickly agrees to hand over his supplier, Dr. Zahorian.
Dunn had been, I gather, caught with a large amount of steroids, flipped, became a government witness, agreed to wear a wire. I think they made some controlled purchases with him where they sent him in and had him mic'd up and recorded it.
I want to get a large order, but I need some, can you tell me what you need? Because, you know, it's like I told you, cash and carry. You know, if I have it, you got it, you pay.
He didn't sound like a doctor. He was talking about it.
Sound like a drug dealer.
To kids. You're selling steroids to somebody
What's up, RJ?
with knowledge that they're going to deliver them to kids.
Yoshi King.
You're not functioning as a doctor.
As authorities build their case against Dr. Zahorian, a federal official mentions the investigation to a colleague who has ties to the WWF. The news reaches the desk of Vince McMahon's wife, Linda, who commands the company distance itself from Dr. Zahorian.
Yeah, the internal memos were, we don't want this guy at our shows anymore. And we need to be really cautious because the landscape has changed right now.
They used that tape of Zahorian to then get a search warrant. On the wall of his office, you still have that famous picture of him standing there with Hulk on one side and Vince on the other side, and thought, oh, we have here.
As authorities probe Dr. Zahorian's drug-dealing enterprise, a trail of evidence leads them straight to the doorsteps of WWF wrestlers.
I got a knock on my front door. He introduced himself to me and says he's an FBI agent, and started explaining to me that I had gotten 3 FedEx packages from Dr. Zahorian, and they knew everything that was in the package. They would go right into the mail center. They'd ask for any packages sent out of Dr. Zahorian's office. Then they would open, they would film, so they had all the evidence. It was put back in as if it were not touched. You would open it and never in your wildest dreams think that the FBI was looking at it at the FedEx mail center and had pictures of everything that came to your doorstep. He said, you can come testify and in exchange, we won't prosecute you. I said, fair enough.
Wow.
I just sat down on my table and I said, wow, I can't believe this is actually happening.
The wrestler said that when they couldn't see Dr. Zahorian personally, he sent them steroids by Federal Express. Records show several Federal Express shipments from Dr. Zahorian to Terry Bollea, better known to his fans
Terry Bollea.
as Hulk Hogan.
5 wrestlers are set to testify against Dr. Zahorian, including Hulk Hogan, whose appearance could spell disaster for him, Vince McMahon, and the entire wrestling world.
Wow, this is huge. Amazing. All right, so I'm going to show you guys my guest host for the evening. Please welcome him to the stream.
I spit in the face of people who don't want to be good. You know what good is?
It's Rorito.
What's going on, Matthew?
What's going on? How you feeling?
The AW champ and king, the ring here is here.
Awesome. Yep. What's going on, man? You watching this show?
Yeah, unfortunately, I am. Of course.
Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy. Like, Terry Bollea got FedEx shipments from the doctor. I mean, that's insane.
Yeah, and he used to tell us lies as kids. He would tell us, hey, drink your vitamins. Take them. Remember that?
Yeah. Say your prayers, take your vitamins. And
say your prayers.
Yeah.
Take your vitamins from Flint. And we would all believe him. What kind of crap was that?
Yeah, apparently, though, you know, is it possible? You know, I've heard Hogan stole that whole persona from Bob Backlund.
Wow, really? How so?
Yeah. I was talking to Poppy the other night, and he was telling me about that. He said That whole persona. Take your vitamins. Say your prayers. All that stuff. You know that's what Bob Backlund used to say before Hogan.
Well, Backlund used to be the All-American. You're right about that, pretty much.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I mean,
I truly
most of
believe
us
that.
wouldn't.
I truly believe that that's weird what we just saw right there. That the guys from that take pictures of the box. You saw that right now. That the FBI would open the box, close it, like if they didn't touch anything, and they would set it out, and they knew that they were getting them. The steroids.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's crazy what's going on. You know, with the FBI. I mean, wow, it was huge. The FBI was getting involved.
It's crazy. WWF started this, and I think the sports started doing that afterwards.
Yeah, that would make sense, you know. But I wonder why
Absolutely.
Vince and Linda wanted to part ways from the doctor, Zaharian, before all this stuff went down. I guess they knew it was going to go down.
Well, I bet you it's because they knew common knowledge from the WBF Federation that they had also. The World Building Federation. But we can talk about that next.
Linking him to steroid use. Lawyer Jerry
Okay, Rorito, we'll see you next commercial break.
Hogan excused from testifying.
Hulk was riding high. He had been on the cover of Sports Illustrated. He was as big in that time period as Michael Jordan was in basketball. They wanted to have a big high-profile trial at that time to sort of get it out there that the law is different now with respect to steroids. And I think that had a lot to do with why they brought WWE people in. It was pretty obvious that they were going to get a conviction on the 10 counts that involved Bill Dunn. And at the same token, none of the wrestlers had done anything wrong.
The fact that Piper was there and not Hogan at the Zaharian trial is one of these mysteries. It's like, why were some guys forced to go? Why were some guys given a pass?
He's a little bit unique from
the other Steve G.
Because Terry had what I regard to be a doctor-patient relationship with Dr. Zahorian. He had consulted with Dr. Zahorian about various medical issues involving him and his wife and having children. So I decided that I would present an argument to the judge that the government had no compelling reason to do this because it would compromise his medical privacy rights to have to get on a witness stand and explain why he did what he did. And it would just serve to victimize somebody who had not committed any crime.
He was dismissed from testifying because it might be injurious to his career. Well, it should be injurious to his career if he was on drugs, as his whole persona was say your prayers and take your vitamins, kids. My name is Phil Mushnick. I'm a sports columnist with the New York Post. And in the 1980s, I began to write about the drug scandals within the World Wrestling Federation. I think he dismissed from testifying because it might hurt you to tell the truth.
A person in the media called me up and said Ronald Reagan had to testify in Oliver North's case despite his not wanting to testify. I'll let Hulk Hogan get out of testifying. And I remember my answer was, well, maybe Reagan had the wrong lawyer.
After just 3 hours of deliberation, the jury finds Dr. Zahorian guilty of selling steroids to wrestlers who were not his legitimate patients. But despite the disgraced doctor taking the fall, Vince McMahon and the WWF do not emerge unscathed.
On the last day, the lawyer for Zahorian goes, Vince McMahon and Hulk Hogan bought their steroids from Zahorian. Now, that's when they both had to go to the media and say something.
A promise that the World Wrestling Federation will be the standard bearer for drug-free sports and entertainment.
Today, Vince McMahon, head of the World Wrestling Federation, held a press conference announcing that the Federation will be enacting a drug testing policy that will include testing for steroids.
At the press conference at the Plaza Hotel in 1991, when Vince announced his steroid policy, by chance or by design, the same night, Hulk Hogan is appearing on Arsenio Hall.
Did you ever discuss with Terry his appearance on Arsenio?
Yes, but I can't tell you what the discussion was because that's privilege.
Your name came up recently when a doctor got himself into trouble.
This is going to be a tough thing because if he goes out on TV and tells the truth, it's like his image is going to be shot.
So basically what I'd like to do is, with all due respect, inform you and everybody else that's misinformed by the newspapers.
So he weaseled his way down to something that sounded less offensive, but still, to his mind, felt like an admission of something.
You know, on 3 different occasions, I had the same type of muscle injuries. That is the extent of Hulk Hogan's steroid use.
And it's like, I took steroids 3 times back in 1983. I tore my bicep. I used it for rehab. And it was just like, oh my God, it's just a complete, utter lie.
So I'm not a steroid abuser, and I do not use steroids.
Vince did not want Hogan to say what he said. Certainly Vince told me that. You know, he said, I told Hogan just tell the truth, and he didn't tell the complete truth.
If you train, say your prayers, eat your vitamins, and believe in yourself, just like I have done, brother, you can have everything you want out of life, and I'm not ashamed of anything I've done.
What he said did not pass the public sniff test, and everybody thought, okay, that guy's a liar. He's covering something up.
Okay, we'll take commercial come right back.
After Hogan's appearance on Arsenio Hall, McMahon was called to answer for a range of scandalous allegations on the Phil Donahue show.
This bright audience knows damn well that steroids were used.
I think Vince McMahon didn't like me. Something that happened on the Phil Donahue show where I caught him in a lie, basically. I mean, we're on the panel, and I said, Vince, didn't you say in published reports that you were devastated when you found out that Hulk Hogan lied on Arsenio Hall? I wasn't devastated. And he looked at me and goes, I never said I was devastated. And Dave Meltzer said, oh, yes, you did. You told me.
So we're used to me. Well, all right.
You did lie.
Sitting here going like, you told me this. I'm not going to sit here and say nothing when that's the exact word you use.
Tell Eric Freeman.
And then he gave me a look like, if looks could kill, I wouldn't be around anymore. The day of the Donahue show, something really, really scary happened. I had an apartment on Long Island. There was a knock on the door. I wasn't there. My mom, who used to live with me, she opened the door up, and there were 2 gentlemen standing there, and they asked if John Arezzi lived there. And my mom said, yeah, my son lives here. Please tell your son he lives in a dangerous neighborhood. And I was like, whoa, what was that all about, you know?
That's sort of part of the problem with these guys. They have vivid imaginations. They say these things, and nobody would care enough about a John Arezzi to send black-suited guys to his house. That's kind of fables that they tell to sort of give themselves an importance that they don't have. And what happened was Phil Mushnick started writing these hit pieces.
Yeah, and it just seems as though they're all ganging up on us all at one time.
And said he was worse than Hannibal Lecter. You're going to call him something like that because people did something that was legal to do when they did it.
McDivitt's tactics going after journalists are, you know, right out of central casting from old courtroom dramas.
He perceived it was wrong that Hulk Hogan had been excused from testifying and called out for in one of his writings another federal investigation of the WWE. And the Eastern District prosecutors read that and took up his call for another investigation.
He's flattering me. I had no idea I had this kind of muscle.
And I was actually up at the WWE's headquarters. We got the first of what became 7 or 8 grand jury subpoenas issued from the Eastern District of New York that commenced the investigation. I think it was in April 2nd of 1992. I remember talking about it with Vince, and he asked me to represent them in it. And you just kind of know in this business certain things, you know, the minute you get the subpoena, what the result's going to be. This is not going to be an investigation where they're going to look into something and then say, okay, nothing there. This is a witch hunt.
Wow. That is insane, guys. Absolutely insane what they're talking about here. Let's bring back a guest host here. King Rory, what's going on?
What's going on?
How you feeling? So it looked like they caught Vince in a lie there.
Well, it seems like Vince and Hogan make a great team lying.
Yeah, I remember that interview with Arsenio Hall. Hogan kept saying the word basically, if I could remember correctly, right?
Yeah, basically, we all know he was lying, and so was Vince in everything he did. And basically, he says, basically everything in this situation with the steroids, most of these wrestlers, even though we made a picture that it was only wrestlers, we know it was the entire roster who used steroids. We know that.
Yeah.
We can't be fooled.
Yeah.
Men like the big guys. He don't like the short, skinny guys, right?
Yeah, Vince loved the big guys. Yeah.
So I think he was also a building type of guy who was frustrated that he couldn't get the muscles. That's why he wanted everybody to be big, huge.
Yeah, I'd say he wanted everyone to be big and huge, as big as they can possibly become, you know, and larger than life characters. That's what he wanted. And
was that
that's what
earlier? What I saw earlier, was that Warlord?
That was Warlord, yeah.
So yeah, he was when he started with WWF, he was like 200, and he was inflated to 300 pounds because of the steroids. Come on, really? You couldn't do it any other way?
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
I say what started getting the government involved because they knew everything that was going on. But it happened every sport, not just in wrestling. But like we were talking about before the commercial, this happens also with the bodybuilding. And some people say, oh, go ahead.
Yeah,
what do you say about the bodybuilding?
Yeah, bodybuilding, it's a rough industry. Yeah, these guys are using anabolic steroids, absolutely. And, you know, they're getting it prescribed from their doctors as well. Or, you know, they're getting it from other sources. You know, it's just insane.
Look at situation. I get on emails that typically baseball players get when they, for baseball season and stuff like that. They tell baseball players, hey, here's a book that's 800 pages. And it tells you what substances are banned. And because they actually don't want to read it, or they don't want to call in,
McMahon and his legal
they don't actually pay attention to it.
They're going to find something to
We'll keep going afterwards.
It's a plea bargain to something.
Okay, Roy.
So hunker down. For the next 18 months, it was sort of the feeling of being stalked. Because you know somebody is following you around, looking at everything you do, and that they are eventually going to try to harm you. And there's no limit to how long the government can go on to do that to you. And so when I started teaching myself everything I could learn about steroids, all you can do is prepare for what you know is going to come.
With a grand jury investigation in full swing, the WWF's woes become tabloid fodder. I was told by McMahon that I was an FBI informant.
Well, I think, you know, they leak various things to the media so that the media writes a story that what I call further demonizes the target, builds public support for the prosecution. In exchange, they have inside sources of the investigation and things of that nature. They all, of course, deny it, that any of that stuff goes on, but, you know, it does.
I was an FBI informant. What I wrote, they'd read, and then they acted on it. So I guess I informed them, as well as every other reader of that column. You gotta understand, leading up to that trial, McMahon's not just taking me sitting down. He's got me trailed. He's got a group called Fairfax Partners, former FBI agents, who are looking for anything they can get on me. I actually ran into one of these guys. I found out who he was. He was investigating me. And we're laughing and we're drinking. And we're getting along great. He says to me, listen, I know you're a good guy, but this is my job. I said, that's a lousy job. And I told him, I said, I smoked a lot of pot in college. Go with it. Go with it. Take me down. And he was laughing. He's laughing. As prosecutors subpoena witnesses, media reports indicate that McMahon's limo driver, James Stewart, is prepared to testify that McMahon ordered him to deliver a shipment of steroids to Hulk Hogan.
Why do you think they didn't call him as a witness in Vince's trial?
Probably because he had brought a lawsuit against WWE for some, I can't remember what reasons he conjured up. And when I took his deposition, I caught him dead to rights, perjuring himself. I don't think you'd want to put on a witness stand somebody who had admitted to committing perjury and other proceedings.
In the midst of the federal investigation, the WWF initiates a dramatic overhaul of the types of physiques it features on television.
Because of the steroid scandal, Vince McMahon couldn't keep Hogan around.
It's like a slap in the Hulkster's face, baby.
Hogan was the star of the show. And had been for years and years and years. But it was coming time that Vince wanted to get younger.
Vince McMahon is probably thinking, do I want a diminished, thinner Hulk Hogan as my centerpiece, advertising to my audience how important steroids were to his look? So Vince McMahon had to shift his focus to smaller wrestlers who were more athletic.
Despite the WWF veering away from excessively muscular body types and Hulk Hogan departing the company, in November of 1993, the hammer finally drops.
We were in New York, walked in the restaurant, all the news was on, McMahon indicted and whatnot.
The indictment says that McMahon and a doctor conspired to distribute steroids to the wrestlers to enhance their size and muscle development.
Everybody in the restaurant was saying things like, "Go get him, Vinny." You know, they were cheering for him. We were kind of celebrating that he got indicted because now we get a chance to put an end to this thing. You know, after 18 months of getting bled to death in the media and all the accusations, please give me a chance to go in a courtroom and kick their butt, because that's the only way this is going to end.
If convicted, McMahon faces 8 years in prison and $500,000 in fines.
That whole trial was like a circus. There were wrestling fans there. There were the newsletter writers there. Vince's family that would show up every day in the courtroom.
Stephanie and Shane, they were not confident. They were scared, and they loved their dad, and they wanted to protect the family empire at that point also.
And then Vince shows up wearing this neck brace, and, you know, everyone is kind of laughing at it.
People are like, "You've got to be kidding me. You're actually playing on the jury for sympathy in a neck brace?"
Vince McMahon was the babyface to this audience, which was funny to me because it's like cheering for like the guy on trial.
Here we go. It's a wrestling angle.
I know there was a lot of speculation that that was for sympathy. When it wasn't, it was very real. He had actually had neck surgery. He knew he was going to have to be at that trial and scheduled it so that he would have that done then, so he wouldn't have to be on TV with a neck brace on. So that's why it was set for that time.
The prosecution team, led by Sean O'Shea, have a lineup of WWF superstar witnesses set to testify, including the Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan. Jerry McDivitt's prior representation of Hogan at the Zahorian trial is regarded as a conflict of interest, forcing McMahon's team to bring in reinforcements.
Laura had been a former prosecutor, very well regarded, so I said, this is what we'll do. I will represent WWE, Laura will represent Vince personally, and we'll rely on Laura's cross-examination of Hogan. They couldn't then use my prior representation to knock me out of the case. And that also gave us the advantage of having double openings, double closings, two people doing cross-examinations and whatnot.
They sent me a subpoena, said, we'd like you to be at the trial on this day. The best thing I did was just tell the truth. Vince never came to me face to face and said, Terry, if you don't take steroids, you don't have a job.
Apparently you said on the stand you never bought from Zahorian because his prices were too high.
That's true. His prices were like 4 times what I could get it for.
And it was like emblematic of their case. They had so many people that came in and said, yes, I used steroids. I used steroids before I ever came to the WWE. And I didn't buy them from Dr. Zahorian. And you're left there sitting there scratching your head thinking, why are they even here?
The whole thing to me was just a big witch hunt. They just wanted to go after Vince for something.
Other wrestlers described steroid regimens that they began long before coming to the WWF, but that changed under McMahon's direction when the law shifted in 1990, until one finally delivers what looks like a knockout punch.
Ooh, knockout punch. Is that nails? Is that nails? Welcome back to the stream. Rorito! King Rory, what's going on, man?
They typically say, you know, about sports stars, like they send, let's say, an 800-page email and then send books to the actual baseball players. They probably send it to the actual wrestlers that they say, okay, you can't take these supplements, and they don't read them. But they give them a 1-800 number that they can call in and say, hey, I'm taking this medicine. Can I take it? It has steroids, yes or no? And then if it does, obviously, you got to take an exemption for a doctor. But it seems like these people didn't care about it. And they didn't call the hotlines or stuff like that or talk to the doctor about it, because that doctor was bad news. Obviously, they had other doctors besides the Dr. Zahorian, and then obviously there was nothing to be done about it.
It's just mind-boggling. I mean, so were you around when Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa, they were having that home run?
Yeah,
contest?
I lived in St. Louis. I remember
You lived in,
that.
oh,
I lived in St.
that
Louis.
must have been huge. But did you have any idea that they were taking steroids? Well,
obviously, I couldn't tell you at that time, but over time, the thing is, like, how everything changed. You could never get a body like that to hit 60 balls out of the park, because before that, only Roger Maris and Babe Ruth had done it.
Right.
So imagine that. And then 3 years later, Barry Bonds had 73. Come on.
Yeah,
seriously.
isn't that wild?
You can't have, you have to have vision. You can't just have steroids. You have to have vision in order to hit the baseball. That's how I look at it.
Absolutely. What's up, Hunter? What's up, Unknown Reaper? Yeah, it's just crazy. I mean, and then, well, going back to the show, these guys said that they were taking steroids before getting into professional wrestling, into WWE. So they've already taken steroids before going there. So they never bought from Zaharian.
That's probably why Vince McMahon got scot-free.
Oh, his Nails.
Kevin Wackles, the wrestler Nails, gave testimony.
Nails.
His story was that Vince McMahon told him, we need you to get on steroids.
And then we showed the jury a picture of how he performed, which was in this orange outfit that covered his body. So he wasn't a performer like an Ultimate Warrior or somebody whose body you actually saw.
So why McMahon would want him to be on steroids in the midst of a controversy that can hurt his company, and when an outfit won't reveal any muscles, really seems questionable or lacking credibility.
At the end, she was like, do you have any animosity towards Vince McMahon? And he goes, no. And she just goes, he doesn't know what the word animosity means. And he goes, do you hate Vince McMahon? And he goes, yes.
The whole thing is weak. Do you believe that he's essentially innocent? I think he took professional wrestling to a level of success and he made a lot of enemies.
After a string of disappointments for prosecutors, desperate to convince the jury McMahon conspired with Dr. Zahorian, they bring in Zahorian directly from his prison cell to testify against McMahon.
And during his direct examination, Dr. Zahorian kept vaguely referring to some letter he had written, which we didn't have a copy of. Finally, the judge ordered him to turn over any letters that they had received from Dr. Zahorian. And it's all in the midst of the trial. When this document gets turned over, while Zahorian's on the witness stand. And so I'm reading it, and I was stunned. Dated May 19th, 1993. Dear Mr. O'Shea, as you know, I recently testified before the federal grand jury. My testimony was required by you pursuant to subpoena, but I nonetheless consented and agreed to cooperate. As a result, I was transported by the federal marshals in handcuffs, waist chains, and leg chains, and detained at various prisons for a period of 44 days under conditions more appropriate for violent, maximum security inmates. They'd take him for 44 days on this tour of these various solitary confinement and whatnot. He has no idea what's happening to me. What is this about? Nobody tells him anything. He arrives in the Eastern District of New York, and he's taken into the grand jury without any preparation at all. And they ask him, well, we've been told about some conversation you supposedly had with Vince McMahon about steroids. Can you tell us about that? And his answer was, I don't know what you're talking about. And they take him out of the room. After he's taken out of the room, he's put in these other hellholes in New York, solitary confinement. And I remember reading that to the jury and thinking, like, this is the kind of stuff that gets done in America to get somebody. After that, they bring him back in a grand jury room, and before they do, they tell him, we have this tape recording of you with Bill Dunn. You were indicating that you were willing to sell steroids to kids, which you haven't been charged with yet. And so they asked the same question. Did you have a conversation with Vince? And so then all of a sudden, yeah, I did have a conversation with Vince.
While on the stand, Dr. Zahorian recounts a meeting with McMahon where he disclosed that he was selling drugs to his wrestlers, but McMahon never told him to stop.
And that sole conversation then becomes the only basis for charging Vince with having some conspiracy of any kind with Dr. Zahorian. Nothing in that conversation, of course, has anything to do with defrauding the FDA or anything like it.
When questioned by prosecutors, Dr. Zahorian denied his treatment was malicious or influenced his testimony. Pre-trial interactions with witnesses were apparently not only limited to prosecutors. Vince McMahon's personal assistant, Emily Feinberg, had intimate knowledge of his own steroid use and records of financial transactions between McMahon and Zahorian that could shatter his defense.
I remember watching Laura Bavetti cross-examine Emily Feinberg, and it's like, she has ESP. She knows every answer, and she's got her comeback on every answer, like immediately. And I never thought anything about it until that story in the Village Voice came up. Marty Bergman was the secret husband of Laura Bavetti. Her husband was talking to me as like another reporter discussing the trial before the trial.
And he calls me, and he's representing himself as representing 60 Minutes. And I go, yeah. Like, tell me about McMahon. What do you know that you haven't written that we can get into? I said, I don't know. What I know, I've written. And if I knew something else, I'd write it, and I wouldn't tell you. I remember calling my wife's cousin, who's an entertainment lawyer, and I said, I heard from one of 60 Minutes' producers today. And he said, what's the name? He says, well, he's not a producer. That's his brother. He said, he's not a producer? He said, no.
I read that he told Emily Feinberg that he was going to get like book deals and things like this. He was pumping her for info, and Laura's there with every rebuff right there. It's like she knew everything. It was unbelievable.
I knew Marty. He was a good guy. I like Marty. He was Mr. New York as far as I was concerned. And if there had been anything that he had done that constituted witness tampering, they would have brought it out when she was on the witness stand, and there was nothing like that.
Vince McMahon himself addressed the allegations shortly after they appeared in print.
I wish to state that my heart goes out to my attorney, Laura Bavetti, and her husband, Marty Bergman. These same yellow journalists who had to eat crow for telling lies are once again incestuously joining forces, trying to drum up support for their own personal agenda, trying to manufacture some reason to save face, attempting to perpetuate some theory of witness tampering. Gentlemen, is that the best you can do?
The establishing of venue, a legal requirement that cases are brought in the area where the alleged crimes occurred, becomes a key point in the trial. Although Dr. Zahorian sold steroids in Pennsylvania, the charges against Vince and the WWF were brought by the Eastern District of New York. Prosecutors need to demonstrate that some steroid distribution happened in the Eastern District.
The thing I can't understand is why the government indicted McMahon on Long Island when all the paper trails were right there in his backyard in Stamford, Connecticut. I thought that was folly.
They principally tried to use her to establish venue. by suggesting that she had taken some steroids and delivered them to Hulk Hogan through a driver. And so they got her up on the witness stand and said, well, I think they were delivered, you know, to Madison Square Garden or Nassau Coliseum and whatnot. So we had to dissect that testimony by showing, okay, here's the date you received the steroids. Here's the agent's reports for when the WWE performed at Nassau Coliseum. There's no match between the two. How in the world would you have delivered anything to Hulk Hogan at Nassau Coliseum when he wasn't even there in those dates? So
that was like one of the counts that Vince was being indicted on, and that charge was thrown out. It's like, why was that charge there in the first place?
The witness who could do the most damage would be Hulk Hogan, who had recently signed with McMahon's rival, WCW. Hogan is granted immunity for anything he would reveal on the stand about how he got his steroids from Dr. Zahorian while working for McMahon.
There was no doubt that all of this steroid scandal stuff caused a rift between Hogan and McMahon, and there were expectations that Hogan was going to go in there and kind of bury Vince.
Wow. That is insane. Insane. Let's welcome back our guest host, Rorito. What's going on, man?
Doing well. So I really think that it caused a rift between Hogan and McMahon, and that's why he left WWE. Would you say the same thing?
I would say so. I mean, and Hogan, you know, he was already signed with WCW, I believe, too, right? He was leaving.
He actually didn't want to fight, but he actually had immunity in order, if I remember right.
Yes.
So
they said that, yeah.
So based on that case, I truly believe that he didn't want to get into it. The thing is, come on, seriously. Like Dr. Doge says, the steroids are done to actually help recover injuries. It's all. That's what we gotta look at. Many people have that mistaken. Like we were talking about baseball thing earlier. It doesn't give you skill at all. It helps you recover back from injuries that steroids. That's what I believe.
Oh, okay, I see.
Well, if something happens to you, if something happens to you in an injury, if somebody takes a steroid to take them fewer days because taking an anabolic supplement. And they didn't go into detail also. Go ahead.
Although they
go ahead.
Why did they also say that? Why did the trial take place on Long Island instead of in Pennsylvania?
You mean Connecticut?
Oh, Connecticut, right? Connecticut.
Rather than, I truly believe that that's where the distribution. Titan Towers actually was in Connecticut, but supposedly that's where Hogan had his stuff, his office and stuff like that. I believe that.
Yeah, because they found that odd too. Like like Meltzer especially, they found that very odd that he wasn't tried in his home turf, you know, like Connecticut. So I thought
yeah,
that
buy
was
me the new microphone, Danny. Buy the microphone. I would definitely leave a microphone. This one fell in the water earlier. Or you can throw it in the river. How about that?
Yeah. What'd you say?
Hey, I think you guys heard.
What'd you say, Roy? All right, we'll talk
Hulk Hogan
after this, Roy.
testifying could seal the deal for the prosecution and sentenced to prison for years. He is the person the prosecution said bought drugs from Vince McMahon.
Oh, he's on Roy too. I can see that.
Wrestlemania destroys you. It was very dramatic. I felt sorry that he was going to get drugged through it again.
Hulk Hogan is finally here. What is he going to say?
I know what was on the line there. The problem was that they were Vince McMahon in jail. They should have put the whole wrestling career in jail. You know, he didn't sell him. He didn't inject me like he didn't do it.
Hogan framed it to the shock of the prosecutors and to people gasping in the courtroom quietly. We were gym buddies. We were friends. Sometimes I had extra steroids, I gave him to Vince. Sometimes Vince had extra steroids, he gave them to me. That doesn't make him a drug dealer.
I mean, he was the big dog, and when he walks in and says, it doesn't have anything to do with the conspiracy, there goes their case.
He kind of just like exonerated Vince for any implication of his involvement at all, which to this day is kind of something you wonder about.
That's why Vince McMahon survived it. Vince didn't go to jail for 17 years because of me.
Having watched it, I felt Hogan's testimony was very beneficial to Vince. Vince didn't see it that way. Vince was furious Hogan testified against him.
Yeah, I think they didn't want any part of each other towards the end. It was kind of like, you go your way, I go my way, and nice knowing you, pal.
McMahon spokesman says Hulk Hogan body slammed the prosecution.
Why didn't you have Vince testify?
I mean, what would he say? There was no evidence against Vince other than that silly conversation I told you that Dr. Zorian trotted out after he went through his 44 days of traveling through solitary confinement in jails. But there was nothing even about that conversation, even if it occurred, that was incriminating.
Sean O'Shea's closing argument went from reserved to explosive and bombastic, and it was a flurry of language that painted Vince McMahon in a villainous way.
He goes, you know, has no respect for wrestling? Vince McMahon. It was like an amazing pro wrestling promo.
Corporate drug dealers and all this just horribly inflammatory terms that most judges wouldn't let a prosecutor get away with doing because they don't have anything to do with the facts and they're just trying to prejudice the jury.
And he starts talking about how it was the hundreds of millions of dollars that Vince McMahon made off of these steroids, off of these guys. I mean, he did a great speech.
O'Shea, I think at that point, framed it as you need to take down Vince McMahon because he's treating wrestlers as slabs of meat to make money and gain power and fame. And this was nefarious and intentional, and he knew what he was doing.
I went out in the hall, and Stephanie was out in the hallway. She was a young girl then, and she was crying. And I was really liked Stephanie, and she was very upset at the things he was saying about her father. I just remember saying to her, Steph, you haven't heard me yet. Just wait. His case is all sizzle, no steak, all icing, no cake. Whenever we were doing our research and I was plumbing the FDA files, I came across these documents for a drug called Anavar, which is a very powerful steroid. And it was a memo where the FDA was meeting with the manufacturer, telling them that Anavar was not safe for human consumption and that it had to be removed from the market. This drug has been given to many of these men who are coming in here to testify in this case. It demonstrates how inept they were in regulation when your internal memos say that you have determined that Anavar is unfit for human consumption and should be removed from the market. And you know they didn't do that. The jurors passed a note to the judge saying, we want to know whether what Mr. McDivitt is saying is true or not. Did they not remove Anavar from the market? And we go to the sidebar and O'Shea is, don't tell him, Judge. I'm going, tell him the truth. Tell him the truth. And so eventually the judge tells him, no, it wasn't removed from the market. I thought at that point, the jury really gets it. they understand hypocrisy. This whole prosecution, for them to be coming in here saying these men were some part of some plan to defraud the government agency that's supposed to be protecting them, when the government agency that's supposed to be protecting them failed them completely.
When it came down to closing arguments, he really honed in on the idea of the unfairness of the system. But it was part of a theme in his closing argument of the government is coming after this family business over flimsy arguments that you've watched fall apart before your very eyes the last 3 weeks.
You know, maybe I'm an optimist, but I didn't spend 1 minute of my time thinking about losing.
Interesting. King of Cleveland, what's going on, man? How you feeling? Wow, so that was pretty interesting that the lawyer found this loophole, so to speak. You know, I think that's pretty amazing. It's too bad we couldn't hear from the prosecutor. He denied to be interviewed for this documentary. That's too bad. All right, so welcome back, King Rory.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, and I'm using the same mic.
Okay, all right, sounds better.
Okay. So, what were you thinking about all that?
Yeah, I think they were able to find a loophole there, you know, with that anabolic steroid that they didn't take off the market, even though they were supposed to take it off, but it was still on the market. And who knows? Who knows? Maybe, you know, maybe that was a way to sway the decision of the jury.
Absolutely.
So he did a lot of research with that. You know, he found some way to get the upper hand. You know,
he got a loophole somehow or another.
Yeah.
So, what would you recommend to Jason Eisner if he would be watching for new seasons?
Jason Eisner. Oh, yes. Definitely got to do an episode of Monday Night Wars. Andre the Giant. We need another China episode, this time a Dark Side of the Ring China episode. I'd say this Sid Vicious and Arn Anderson.
The stabbing incident?
Stabbing incident, yes. Now, what about you, Rory?
I would bring in situations like things from the past, like Abdullah the Butcher. Like he was lying about what happened with Brody and also his persona in wrestling. Go more in detail.
She was sitting right next to me.
All right, Rory.
So it's a
We'll
very
see you next commercial break.
intense moment. In the criminal context, there's so much more at stake than money. It's your liberty, it's your life, the survival of the company, it's everything. In federal court, it's in the high 90s% of cases that are indicted. They're either resolved by a guilty verdict or plea bargain. It's an extremely low percentage, like 2 to 5%, that ever go to trial and where there's an acquittal. And you could probably count on one hand where the defendant is acquitted without calling a single witness. And there's no more, for lack of a better word, ballsy move than not to call a witness. And you know, it's one of those strategies where if it's successful and it works, everybody can say, oh, what praise lawyer? They didn't even call a witness. But if it doesn't work and they get a conviction, they say, can you believe that idiot? He didn't call a single witness to defend the guy. You know, I mean, that's one of those, you make your judgment and you'll be judged on it. They took the verdict first against Vince. They said not guilty. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there, you know, representing WWE, thinking, well, what's the verdict on them yet? I'm hoping, don't tell me you made some compromise verdict where you're going to let Vince off, but you'll find the company guilty or something, and that would be terrible.
And when it was not guilty, it was almost like, you know, Hulk Hogan had just won a match at Madison Square Garden. It was like people just popped.
This one is my favorite one up here. The jury announced his verdict. That's Linda named Vince Huggin. And what I always thought was interesting, because that is what happened. The jury verdict was very popular.
And they really were relying on the jury to see conspiracy as an overreach by the prosecution. That's what it boiled down to with the jury, and that's what I think they deliberated over.
I'm sure that he will make it out to be one of his great triumphs in his vision of history. But all the testimony was that all the guys were on steroids. You just didn't get convicted for being part of a conspiracy. But were you built on steroids? Were all those guys on steroids? 100% they were. If anything, all the testimony in that case proved what everyone assumed to begin with anyway.
When Vince McMahon was exonerated from this, he became even a more larger-than-life personality.
Stay tuned, which is we say in the World Wrestling Federation, and it could very well be that the hunters soon will be the hunted.
What does that mean, Vince?
Stay tuned, Rosanna.
He dodged a big bullet.
So we have this celebration back at the hotel we were at. We're sitting there after, I don't know, probably too many cocktails that night at the verdict. And I said to him, "Hey, Vince, you can take that neck brace off." Not kind of kidding him, He takes it off and starts waving.
You took it off.
But then he put it back on right afterwards. Not. I don't want you to think there was nothing wrong with his neck, because there was. It was just kind of a funny moment.
How would you describe you and Vince's bond?
Unbreakable. When you represent somebody in an ordeal like this, and you stay in the trenches with them, and you don't blink, and you fight like hell for them, the loyalties you have to each other, they're lifelong. There's no bond that would ever break that. Period.
I wouldn't say that, man. Bonds can be broken. Bonds can be broken. Let's welcome back our guest host, King Rory. What's going on, King Rory?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Doing well. So what I was going to tell you, I was going to also add into the mix the fall of Impact Wrestling. I would say also Crown Jewel, what happened in Saudi, that they were stuck in the plane for a few hours last year. Remember that? Because probably of the money that they owed them.
Right. I remember that.
And then the weirdness behind Jim Cornette and Bruce Pritchard. And I can't think of any more right now.
Say, I think you mentioned earlier Vince Russo won too, right?
Yeah, Russo would be in regards to what happened into wrestling in regards to, let's say, he brought the Attitude Era, but we got so used to the Attitude Era, and then they took it out of our hands, like after they got to the peak, and then now we're in the PG era. How do you think that hurt or actually helped the industry of wrestling?
Oh, forget it. Yeah, I'm sure it had a huge impact.
Because now we're seeing the decline in the ratings drastically.
Absolutely. Forget it. I mean, I'd say, yeah, if they took our ideas for next season, they'll have a stacked season.
I'm sure they would, but I really think this season could have been a little bit better.
Yeah, I was even expecting a little more out of this episode, with the steroid trial. I mean, they didn't get hardly anybody. They didn't get Hogan. They didn't get Vince. They didn't get.
They didn't get Nails.
They didn't even get. Yeah, they didn't even get Nails. How could they not get Nails? Right?
Nails was the primary witness. This was the whole reason why probably Vince got scotch-free, because of Nails' testimony.
Yeah, why didn't they get Nails out of all people?
Why put Warlord? He wasn't involved like Nails was. You could have had Jesse Ventura. Because remember, he had a situation with them about the royalties.
What's up, James?
They dropped the ball entirely. I think they told us that this was going to be the biggest episode that we had in this season besides the Brian Pillman, and then they dropped the ball in it.
Yeah, it wasn't a great episode. I will say, I think the Luna Vachon episode was really good.
Absolutely.
That was a good one.
The one from last week was pretty interesting.
That was interesting, and I didn't even know much about them. That company,
And remember, we heard about a company, a wrestler from Japan that talked about the fire matches and stuff like that. Like
that was a good episode.
And stuff like that also. That was another good episode. Other than that, I don't consider the rest of the episodes that they were good. Even the plane fried from hell, I didn't enjoy that one at all. Because even though we learned new stuff about Flair, everybody knows that about Flair. They should have complete episode, and we could have an episode for 4 or 5 different hours talking about the rise and fall of Ric Flair.
Oh, that could be an episode too. Yeah, for season 4, Ric Flair.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, or you said the 4 Horsemen.
Yeah, the Horsemen. The
4 Horsemen.
The situation with them, that Flair's not getting along well with them, and now he's wanting all the royalties, and then they didn't call him to give their condolences. Do you think do you think Tully wants him back in the AEW? Do you think Arn wants him in the AEW? I doubt it.
I don't think so. Yeah, I wouldn't think so.
I'm sure Cody would be like, oh yeah, it's the Nature Boy. But come on, if you have one bad apple in the locker room, that's going to completely change the whole locker room and the atmosphere.
What's up, Road Dog? Yeah, I could totally see that. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just mind-boggling what some of these wrestlers, what they've done, what they've gone through, and
they should do one completely after Vince passes away, but I doubt Stephanie, Shane, or the family would do one on Vince's life, like they're gonna do a Netflix movie or a biopic on Vince. They should completely do one on him when he passes away, and then we will really definitely know from wrestlers what it was like working for Vince Jr.
Well, James Williams on the stream says, no, do one about Pat Patterson and the Ring Boys.
Well, that's a unique one. That would be a unique one.
That is unique, yeah.
Now, many people do talk about that. They should do something about that.
It wasn't just Pat Patterson who was being questioned for sexual assault, right? There were others. So they could really do a deep dive into that.
There's so much dark secrets in the world of wrestling that we don't know about, that they keep throwing under the rug. They throw it under the rug until somebody passes away or something happens. So I truly believe that that's something that could change the aspect of the whole companies when they hired other people as well.
Well,
you were talking also about something about earlier, ECW.
Right. The rise
of ECW and the fame of it. We obviously know the fall of it because of Vince buying it, but the rise would be great in detail for them to interview Paul Heyman and what actually inspired him to do something like that.
Yeah, it was like a cult following, the ECW crowds, like they would have the episode at like 2 a.m. Saturday mornings, like in late night, and that's the only way you could see it is like 2 a.m. in the morning on Saturdays, and that was just it was tough to watch, to get a hold of, and then they would have pay-per-views like maybe once in a while. But as soon as they hit mainstream, like they hit the TNN, I believe, it was downhill from there. You know, it was horrible for ECW. But I think they could definitely do an episode about ECW. Yeah, I mean, there's so many things they could do, so many episodes they could do, and hey, who knows? Maybe they'll use some more of our ideas again. Okay, Rory. Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens. But yes, tonight's show was a good show, but I was hoping to get a little more insight, maybe get a few more interviews. As you can see, a lot of participants weren't able to get interviewed, so that's a shame. But in any case, it was definitely eye-opening. I wouldn't say I learned anything too much new tonight. Like I pretty much knew all that stuff already. But as far as the speculation is concerned, like I was able to learn more as far as the lies and tribulations of Vince McMahon. Hogan too, man. Hogan, forget it. What's up, Jackson Parker? We'll do an episode about Hulk Hogan being a politician. Actually, I was thinking about an episode of Hogan and his escapades with Gawker. That would be a huge episode, you know, that could be a season premiere or a season finale of his escapades with Gawker Media. That's another episode idea that would work. Forget it. Back then there's so much roids, needles fell from the rafters, Royal Dog said. Yeah, I can imagine. In a Joe Rogan podcast, The Undertaker actually said there was a doctor who would literally open up his bag and say, "What do you need, kid? Like, whatever you need. He's got it, and he'll give it to you." So there is a lot of truth to this. You know what's going on. Of course, Undertaker didn't offer any names, but who needs names when you know what's going on? I mean, you know exactly what's going on. I mean, it's just horrible that these guys would put their bodies through this. You know, for what? You know, it's just a shame. A shame. Yes, but in any case, I want to thank you guys for joining me tonight. I hope you all be safe and be well. And I'm going to catch you guys next time on a live stream. I'll catch you guys for Friday Night SmackDown. Oh, now it's pills. It's not roids. Yeah, pills. Yep. But you know, even roids, you could get it prescribed from your doctor. You know, even today, you could get a prescription from your doctor. If you could prove you have like low testosterone, you could get pills from your doctor. I mean, it's easy to do. But I wouldn't recommend it. But it's possible to do. All right, guys. So have a great night tonight. Be safe and be well, each and every one of you. And I'll catch you guys next time for the live stream. Good night, everybody. MATTROISE signing out. Be safe and be well.